Close your eyes. Imagine ice. Not the ice of a freezer, not the ice of a winter puddle. But real ice. Arctic ice. Ice that has been ice for longer than most things have been anything. Ice that stretches in every direction to every horizon and beyond, that makes the sky above it look small, that makes everything that moves across it look very small indeed. That is where tonight's story begins. On the ice. In the Arctic. In a silence so complete that the only sound is the wind, and sometimes not even that. Welcome to Sleepy Wilds. Tonight we follow a polar bear across one long, quiet Arctic night and into the ocean beyond the ice. There is nothing here that needs your attention. Nothing urgent. Nothing that will be tested. Just a bear, and the ice, and the particular piece of a world so cold and so empty that silence is simply the natural state of things. Let's begin. It is 3 in the afternoon in the high Arctic, though the sun, which at this latitude and this time of year does not set but simply circles low around the horizon, gives no particular indication of this. The light is the same pale gold it has been for hours. The bear has been walking for approximately 2 hours and 14 minutes. She does not know this. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear is an adult female polar bear. Ursus maritimus, approximately 9 years old, weighing approximately 210 kilograms. 210 kilograms is within the normal range for an adult female polar bear, which typically weighs between 150 and 250 kilograms. Adult male polar bears are considerably larger, weighing between 300 and 800 kilograms, making them one of the largest land predators on Earth. The bear is not a male. She is 210 kilograms, which is to say she is approximately 1.5 times the weight of a large adult male human, or approximately the weight of 3 Kevin the pandas, though Kevin weighs approximately 138 kilograms and 3 of him would be 414 kilograms, which is too many Kevins. The bear is walking across sea ice in the Beaufort Sea, approximately 300 kilometers north of the Alaskan coast. The sea ice here is approximately 1.4 meters thick on average, though it varies considerably from place to place, thicker where pressure ridges have formed and ice has piled on ice, thinner in the leads, the channels of open water that form and close as the ice moves. She is walking toward a lead she can smell. She can smell the open water from approximately 30 kilometers away. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The bear's sense of smell is one of the most sensitive of any mammal. Polar bears have been documented detecting seals, their primary prey, through 1 meter of snow, at distances of up to 32 kilometers. 32 kilometers. The human nose can detect strong odors at approximately 2 to 5 kilometers under optimal conditions. The bear's nose is doing something the human nose simply cannot do. It is reading the landscape from the inside out, receiving information about what is ahead long before anything is visible, building a picture of the ice ahead that has nothing to do with what the eyes can see. She walks toward what she can smell. The ice beneath her is white and vast and flat in most directions, broken occasionally by pressure ridges where ice sheets have collided and pushed against each other, creating long, jagged walls of compressed ice that rise 2 to 3 meters above the surrounding surface and cast sharp shadows in the low Arctic sun. The bear moves around these ridges rather than over them, her path following the easier ground between them, the same unhurried logic that guides most movement across difficult terrain. There is no hurry here. There has never been any hurry here. The Arctic does not hurry. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The bear's footsteps make a sound on the ice. It is a sound that is difficult to describe to someone who has not heard it, a soft, compressed crunch that is not quite the sound of snow and not quite the sound of hard ice but something between the two, the particular sound of a very large animal walking on a surface that is almost but not entirely solid. Each footfall lands with a certainty that is the certainty of 210 kilograms of bear. Her paws are large. Polar bear paws are proportionally larger than those of other bear species, partially webbed between the toes, with small soft papillae on the underside that provide grip on the ice. The front paws measure approximately 30 centimeters across. 30 centimeters. If you were to place your hand next to a polar bear's paw print in the snow, your hand would look like a child's hand next to an adult's. Each paw print she leaves behind her is approximately 30 centimeters wide and slightly longer, a clear, deep impression in the snow surface that records exactly where she has been, though in this part of the Arctic, there is no one to read the record, and the wind will smooth it away within hours regardless. She walks on. The prints appear and disappear behind her. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. Let the image of those prints settle for a moment. A line of very large paw prints across an enormous white landscape, leading from somewhere you can't see to somewhere ahead that the bear can smell and you cannot. There is something in that image that belongs alongside the particular quality of almost sleep, the moments when the mind is still moving through something but the effort of moving has reduced to almost nothing, when thoughts arrive and pass without being grasped, the way the bear's prints appear and are left behind, present for a moment and then simply part of the ice. Let your own thoughts do that now. They do not need to go anywhere. They do not need to arrive at anything. They can simply appear, and pass, and the ice can continue, and the bear can continue, and you can continue, drifting slowly toward the place where the thoughts stop coming altogether and there is simply the quiet. The bear is approximately 12 kilometers from the lead now. She can smell it more clearly. The scent of open water in the Arctic carries with it the cold mineral smell of the deep ocean, the faint biological scent of the algae that grows beneath the ice, and the particular smell of air that has been over open water. The bear walks toward it at approximately 5 kilometers per hour, which is her normal walking speed, which is fine. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The light is changing. Not darkening. At this latitude and this time of year the sun does not set. But the angle at which it hits the ice has shifted slightly since the afternoon began, the light now coming from a slightly lower position on its endless circuit of the horizon, casting the pressure ridges in longer shadows than before, making the flat ice between them look smoother and more even. The ice glows in this light. Not the warm glow of something lit from within but the cool, reflective glow of something that is bouncing the sun's light back up into a sky that is pale blue at the horizon and deepening to a richer, darker blue at the zenith. Approximately 80 to 90% of sunlight striking Arctic sea ice is reflected back into the atmosphere. This is called albedo. The albedo of sea ice is approximately 0.8 to 0.9. The albedo of the open ocean is approximately 0.06. This difference, between ice that reflects most of the sunlight it receives and ocean that absorbs most of it, is one of the reasons that the loss of Arctic sea ice has significant consequences for global climate. The bear is not thinking about this. The bear is walking toward the smell of the open water. The ice glows around her. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The bear stopped. She stopped at 3:41 in the afternoon, approximately 1.7 kilometers from the lead she has been walking toward. She stopped, and stood, and lifted her head, and her nose worked the air for approximately 2 minutes and 12 seconds. Nothing had changed about the air. The lead was still there. The seal scent she had detected approximately 40 minutes ago, faint, from the direction of the lead, was still there. The wind was still from the northwest at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. Nothing had changed. The bear stood for 2 minutes and 12 seconds and then began walking again. Polar bears stop frequently during travel. Research using GPS tracking collars has documented that bears stop anywhere from 30 to 60 times per hour during extended walks across sea ice, each stop lasting from a few seconds to several minutes. The reasons for individual stops vary. Some are clearly related to hunting assessment, the bear stopping to scent check potential prey locations. Some correspond to changes in terrain, the bear pausing before a pressure ridge or a lead crossing. And some, like this one, have no apparent cause. The bear stood. The bear walked. That is all that can be said about it. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. By 5 in the afternoon, the bear had reached the lead. The lead was a channel of open water approximately 40 meters wide, running roughly northeast to southwest as far as the eye could see in both directions. The water was dark, almost black compared to the white of the ice on either side, the surface slightly ruffled by the northwest wind, each small wave catching the low sun and reflecting it briefly before the wave passed. The bear stood at the ice edge. She looked at the water. This moment, a polar bear standing at the edge of the ice looking at the open ocean, is one of those images that is very difficult to look away from if you have ever seen it. There is something in the contrast. The white bear against the dark water. The solidity of the ice behind her and the movement of the water in front. The fact that she is entirely comfortable in both worlds, that for her the transition from ice to water is not a threshold but simply a change of medium. She stood at the edge for approximately 3 minutes. Then she lowered her head toward the water. She was not hunting. She drank. The water in the Arctic leads is salt water, sea water, and polar bears do not typically drink sea water. She was checking. Reading the scent of the water at close range. She lifted her head. She walked along the lead edge. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. The bear walked along the lead edge for approximately 600 meters. She was looking for seals. Ringed seals. Pusa hispida, are the primary prey of polar bears in this part of the Arctic, comprising approximately 90% of their diet. Ringed seals maintain breathing holes in the sea ice, small openings through which they surface to breathe, and will use the same holes repeatedly. The bear was looking for seal breathing holes. She found 3. The first 2 were old, the ice around them beginning to refreeze, signs that the seals using them had abandoned them, moved elsewhere through the water beneath the ice to other holes, other territories. The third was fresh. The ice around the opening was wet, the snow around it disturbed, the scent of seal strong and recent. The bear stopped. She stood over the third hole. And now she waited. Still hunting is the most patient form of hunting that exists among land mammals. The polar bear stands or lies by the breathing hole and waits for the seal to surface. The wait can last minutes. It can last hours. It can last an entire day. The bear settled over the hole. She was very still. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The bear waited. This is worth describing slowly, because the quality of a waiting polar bear is something remarkable. She is 210 kilograms. She is one of the most powerful predators on Earth. And she is still. Completely still. Not the stillness of something that has stopped temporarily. The stillness of something that has located the thing it needs and has surrendered itself entirely to the waiting, has become part of the ice around it, has made itself into another feature of the white landscape, patient and cold and completely committed to remaining exactly where it is for exactly as long as it takes. Researchers who have observed still hunting describe bears remaining motionless at breathing holes for up to 8 hours. 8 hours of stillness. Beside a hole in the ice. Waiting for a sound. There is something about that stillness that finds its way through any distance and into the body of anyone who has ever watched it happen or heard it described. Something that says, without words, that stillness is not the absence of something. It is a thing in itself. Let that be true right now. The stillness you are settling into is not the absence of activity. It is its own thing. The bear waits. And the Arctic holds everything in its enormous, cold, patient quiet. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The bear waited for 47 minutes. During those 47 minutes, the wind continued from the northwest at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The low Arctic sun continued its circuit of the horizon. The lead continued to move very slightly as the ice on either side of it shifted in response to currents far below. And then, at 5:47 in the afternoon, the seal surfaced. The events that followed took approximately 1.4 seconds. The bear's right paw struck the ice at the edge of the breathing hole. The seal, a ringed seal of approximately 60 kilograms, reacted with the speed that prey animals develop over evolutionary time. The outcome of this particular encounter was inconclusive, the seal having submerged again before the bear's paw reached the water. The bear withdrew her paw. She stood at the breathing hole for approximately 30 seconds. Then she moved approximately 2 meters to her left, lay down on the ice, and rested her head on her forepaws. She did not leave. She was still hunting. She had simply adopted a more comfortable position from which to wait. This is also consistent with documented polar bear hunting behavior, the transition from standing still to lying still at the breathing hole, occurring when the bear assesses that the wait will be extended. The bear lay on the ice. The ice held her. The Arctic held everything. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The bear lay on the ice for 1 hour and 23 minutes without moving significantly. She breathed. That was essentially all that happened. Her breathing rate while lying still is approximately 6 to 8 breaths per minute, considerably slower than her breathing rate while walking, and producing a visible movement in her sides, a slow rise and fall that was the only consistent motion in this part of the Arctic for the duration of the wait. The ice beneath her was cold. This is obvious but worth stating, because the cold of Arctic sea ice at this temperature, approximately -18 degrees Celsius at the surface, is a cold that most things cannot tolerate indefinitely. The polar bear is not most things. Her fur consists of 2 layers. An outer layer of guard hairs, each approximately 5 to 6 centimeters long, that sheds water and reflects light. An inner layer of dense underfur that provides insulation. The guard hairs are transparent, not white, but hollow and transparent, appearing white because they scatter visible light. The bear is not white. The bear is transparent. Or rather, the bear appears white because her transparent hairs scatter light the way snow scatters light, which is also not white but simply extremely good at scattering. The bear lay on the ice and appeared white. The ice appeared white. Both were cold. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. Underneath the bear, separated from her only by 1.4 meters of ice, the Beaufort Sea continued its deep and patient existence. The Beaufort Sea is approximately 4,800 meters deep at its deepest point. 4,800 meters. The bear is approximately 1 meter tall at the shoulder. The ocean beneath her is approximately 4,800 times deeper than she is tall. This is not a comparison the bear is making. The bear is thinking about the breathing hole. Or doing whatever bears do instead of thinking, which may be similar to thinking in some ways and entirely unlike it in others, and which researchers continue to study with considerable difficulty given the challenges of determining what is happening inside a polar bear's mind while it lies on sea ice for 1 hour and 23 minutes. The deep ocean beneath the ice carries its own darkness and its own pressure and its own creatures, moving through water that has not seen sunlight since it sank from the surface many hundreds of years ago. All of that is beneath the bear. The bear is unaware of it. The bear is lying on the ice, breathing slowly, waiting. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. Let your own breathing follow the bear's pace for a moment. 6 to 8 breaths per minute. That is longer than you probably breathe normally when you are awake. Breathe in, slowly, counting to approximately 4. Hold for a moment. Then breathe out, slowly, counting to approximately 4 again. That is approximately 1 breath every 8 seconds. Approximately 7 or 8 breaths per minute. The bear's pace. Not something you need to force. Simply something to try, to see if your body finds it comfortable, which it probably will, because slower breathing than your usual waking rate is one of the things your body naturally moves toward when it is settling into rest. You do not need to maintain it deliberately. Simply let your breathing slow of its own accord, the way everything slows of its own accord in the cold and the quiet, the way the bear's breathing has slowed from her walking pace to this long, even, unhurried rhythm. The breathing hole in the ice showed no sign of the seal. The bear continued to wait. Her sides rose and fell. And somewhere, in the warmth and quiet of wherever you are, your own sides are doing the same. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. At 7:14 in the evening, the bear gave up on the breathing hold. She rose from the ice in a movement that was, for a 210-kilogram animal, surprisingly fluid, her large body lifting from the surface without apparent difficulty, her paws finding their positions beneath her in the unhurried way they always did. She stood for a moment. She looked at the breathing hold. Then she walked away from it. There is no drama in this. The bear does not experience failure in the way that the word failure implies. She hunted. The seal escaped. She will hunt again. The Inuit word for this particular moment, a polar bear walking away from an unsuccessful hunt, is a word that translates approximately as going to try somewhere else, which is a description rather than a judgment. The bear was going to try somewhere else. She walked south along the lead, her paws making their soft compressed sound on the ice, the lead a dark line to her left, the flat sea ice stretching away to her right. She walked for approximately 20 minutes, covering approximately 1.7 kilometers, before stopping again at a new section of the lead. The lead here was slightly narrower, approximately 28 meters wide. The bear assessed it. Then she walked into the water. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear entered the water at 7:34 in the evening. She entered it the way polar bears enter water, without hesitation and without drama, simply walking forward until the ice gave way to ocean and her body transitioned from walking to swimming in a movement that required no visible adjustment. The water temperature was approximately -1.8 degrees Celsius. This is the freezing point of salt water. The water in the Beaufort Sea is cold enough to be ice, and is prevented from becoming ice primarily by its salt content and its movement. The bear swam in it without apparent discomfort. Polar bears are extraordinary swimmers. They use their large front paws as paddles, moving them in an alternating motion while their hind legs trail behind, providing some steering. They can maintain a swimming speed of approximately 10 kilometers per hour and have been documented swimming continuously for distances of several hundred kilometers. The bear in this lead was not swimming several hundred kilometers. She was crossing the lead. 28 meters. At 10 kilometers per hour, this crossing would take approximately 10 seconds. It took approximately 12 seconds. The bear climbed onto the ice on the far side, shook the water from her coat in a single large whole-body shake that sent water droplets in a wide arc around her, and continued walking. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The far side of the lead was ice that was slightly different from the ice on the near side. This is not a distinction most people would notice. To the bear, it was immediately apparent. The ice here was younger, thinner, having formed more recently than the multi-year ice she had been walking on before. It flexed very slightly under her weight, not enough to be dangerous for a bear who knows how to read ice, but perceptibly different. The bear walked more carefully here. Not slowly, her pace was essentially unchanged. But her attention to the surface beneath her was different, each step placed with a slightly different quality of awareness than on the solid multi-year ice. Polar bears can assess ice thickness by feel, by the sound it makes under their weight, by the visual quality of its surface. They have been doing this for approximately 350,000 years, the length of time that Ursus maritimus has existed as a distinct species. 350,000 years of walking on ice. 350,000 years of knowing exactly what is solid and what is not. The bear walked on the young ice. The ice held. The wind moved her fur. She continued south. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in there. The light in the Arctic at this hour is a thing that is difficult to prepare for if you have not seen it. It is not the soft golden light of sunset that most people know. It is something flatter, colder, more horizontal, the sun sitting just above the horizon and casting its light at an angle that illuminates the surface of the ice rather than warming it, making every snow crystal visible as a distinct point of light, the whole landscape shimmering very slightly with a light that seems to come from the ground rather than from above. The bear moved through this light. Her white fur in the horizontal Arctic light was not white exactly, it was the color of the light itself, a pale, slightly golden transparency that made her edges difficult to determine. Where she ended and the lit ice began was a question without a clear answer. She was part of the landscape in a way that only two things are, things that belong there utterly, and things that are simply in the way. The bear belonged. She has always belonged here. Her species evolved specifically for this place, this light, this cold, this particular combination of ice and open water and seal and wind. She walked through the light that was made for her. And the light held her the way the ice held her. From everywhere at once. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high Arctic. By 9 in the evening, the bear had covered approximately 8 kilometers since leaving the first breathing hole. She had crossed one lead, walked across young ice and old ice, stopped approximately 31 times for periods ranging from a few seconds to nearly 4 minutes, and had not eaten. She was not, by polar bear standards, hungry. Polar bears can fast for extended periods. Their bodies adapted to metabolize stored fat during times when prey is scarce. Bears that have recently fed well can go without food for months during the summer period when sea ice retreats and seal hunting is difficult. This bear had eaten approximately 10 days ago. A ringed seal weighing approximately 80 kilograms. The metabolic value of an 80-kilogram ringed seal, primarily derived from its blubber, is sufficient to sustain a polar bear for approximately 6 to 9 days. She was approaching the edge of her comfortable fasting window. Which is to say, she was not desperate. She was simply looking. The way most living things are always looking for the next thing they need, not urgently, not frantically, simply keeping the particular antenna of their attention oriented in the direction of what they require. The bear walked on. Her attention was oriented toward the smell of seals. The ice was quiet. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The Arctic held its silence. The bear moved through it without disturbing anything that could not be undisturbed. The light continued its slow circuit of the horizon, pale and patient, as it always is in the high. The bear found a place to rest at approximately 9:41 in the evening. It was a pressure ridge, a long wall of compressed ice approximately 2.5 meters tall, running roughly east to west across the sea ice surface. On the southern side of the pressure ridge, the side away from the northwest wind, there was a natural hollow in the snow that had accumulated against the ridge's base. The hollow was approximately 2 meters wide and just under 1 meter deep. The bear walked to the hollow. She circled it once, the same evaluating circle that most mammals make before lying down, the movement that checks the ground, the scent, the sight lines, everything necessary before the moment of vulnerability that lying down represents. Then she lay down. She curled herself into the hollow, her back against the ice wall of the pressure ridge, her nose tucked under her tail. In this position, the pressure ridge blocked the northwest wind entirely. The temperature in the hollow, sheltered from the wind, was approximately 6 degrees warmer than the exposed ice surface. Still far below zero, but warmer. The bear settled. Her eyes closed. And now you can close your eyes a little more too, if they are not already closed, and simply rest in whatever hollow you have found for tonight. Let the wind be somewhere else. Let it be quiet here. The bear is quiet. The Arctic is holding her. And the night is only just beginning. The bear continued across the ice, unhurried, moving at her usual pace through the cold and the quiet. The ice stretched in every direction. The bear moved across it. Both of these facts were unremarkable in the Arctic. Nothing changed. The wind continued at approximately 12 kilometers per hour. The ice continued to be ice. The bear slept in the hollow beside the pressure ridge. Not deeply, not in the way that a hibernating bear sleeps, because polar bears do not truly hibernate. Pregnant females den and enter a state of reduced metabolic activity during the denning period, but adult males and non-pregnant females remain active throughout the Arctic winter, hunting when conditions allow, resting when they do not. The bear in the hollow was resting. Her metabolic rate had reduced from its active hunting level to something approximately 30% lower, her heart rate dropping from approximately 46 beats per minute while walking to approximately 27 beats per minute while resting. 27 beats per minute. A resting human heart beats approximately 60 to 100 times per minute. The bear's resting heart was beating at less than half the slowest normal human resting rate. This is not something the bear has achieved through practice or intention. It is simply what her body does when she rests. It is, in the most literal sense, the heart rate of something that is at home in the cold. The hollow held her. The pressure ridge blocked the wind. The Arctic night continued above and around her, the sun still circling its low path, the ice still moving almost imperceptibly on the ocean below. The bear rested. There is a phenomenon in the Arctic known as Arctic amplification. The Arctic is warming approximately 4 times faster than the global average. The sea ice that has covered the Arctic Ocean for millions of years, the ice that the bear has been walking across tonight, the ice that is the foundation of her entire existence, is reducing. In 1980, the Arctic sea ice minimum, the smallest extent the ice reaches at the end of summer, was approximately 7.8 million square kilometers. In recent years, it has been approximately 4 million square kilometers. Half. In 40 years. The bear in the hollow does not know this. She cannot know this. She can only know the ice that is currently beneath her, the wind that is currently blocked by the pressure ridge, the hollow that is currently warm enough to rest in. This is offered not as a source of distress. There is enough distress in the world and this is not the place for more of it, but simply as context. When you look at this bear resting in her hollow, you are looking at something that is doing exactly what it has always done, in a world that is, very slowly, doing something different. She rests. That is what she knows how to do. And tonight, that is enough. The bear woke at approximately 12:30 in the morning. The waking was immediate. She was on her feet in approximately 1 second, alert and oriented, her nose reading the air, her eyes scanning the horizon. There was nothing. The wind had dropped while she slept, reduced from 12 kilometers per hour to approximately 4. The ice was quiet. The lead she had crossed earlier was visible in the distance, a dark line against the pale ice. The bear stood in the hollow for approximately 40 seconds. Then her nose moved. Something in the air had changed while she slept. Not a threat. Not a predator, There are no predators of adult polar bears in the Arctic except humans and other polar bears, and neither was present here. Something else. The scent she was detecting was faint, coming from the northwest, carried on the reduced wind from a direction approximately 340 degrees from north. It was the scent of seal. Not from the lead she had already hunted. From somewhere further out on the ice. The bear stepped out of the hollow. She began walking. The bear walked northwest across the sea ice. It was approximately 12:40 in the morning. The light had not changed significantly since the evening, the sun still on its low circuit of the horizon, the ice still carrying the same pale horizontal illumination it had been carrying all night. This is one of the stranger qualities of the Arctic in summer, the suspension of the day-night rhythm that most living things, including the people listening to this story right now, organize their lives around. Here, there is no night in that sense. There is simply light, in varying degrees, moving around the horizon rather than across the sky. The bear has lived her entire life in this light. She does not find it strange. For her, it is simply light. The bear walked northwest at approximately 5 kilometers per hour, slightly faster than her earlier pace, the direction of the scent pulling her forward with a purpose her earlier wandering had not had. She had a direction now. Let that be something you feel in your own body right now, the difference between moving without particular direction and moving with one. The bear has her direction. You have yours. And yours is down. Deeper into the warmth. Deeper into the quiet. The ice the bear was crossing now was older and thicker than the ice near the lead she had crossed earlier. Multi-year ice. Ice that has survived at least one summer melt without disappearing, that has been compressed and refined by repeated freeze-thaw cycles into something denser and harder than first-year ice, the salt having been squeezed out of it over time, making it theoretically drinkable if melted, though the bear was not interested in drinking it. Multi-year ice is rougher than first-year ice, its surface broken by a history of pressure ridges and melt ponds and refreezing, the terrain more varied, more interesting to navigate. The bear moved across it with the easy competence of something that has been doing this its entire life. Each pressure ridge, each irregular surface, simply the next thing. There is no frustration at the difficulty of the terrain. There is no wishing the terrain were simpler. There is simply the terrain, and the movement across it, and the scent pulling her northwest. Your own terrain tonight is flat and warm and undemanding. You do not need to navigate anything. Simply rest where you are. Let the bear do the navigating. She is very good at it. At 1:17 in the morning, the bear stopped. She was at the edge of a large flat section of ice, approximately 200 meters across, that showed the signs of recent seal activity. The signs were subtle. Marks in the snow around 3 breathing holes, scratches in the ice surface near the holes consistent with seal claws, a slight discoloration of the snow near one of the holes. The bear read all of this in approximately 45 seconds. Then she chose her position. She walked to the breathing hole that showed the most recent activity, the one whose snow surroundings showed the least weather softening of the marks, and she stopped. She lowered her body to the ice. She arranged herself on her stomach, her front paws in front of her, her chin resting on the ice, approximately 2 feet from the breathing hole. And she waited again. The waiting is the largest part of a polar bear's life. Not the hunting. Not the walking. Not the swimming. The waiting. And within the waiting, a particular kind of attention that is not tense, not straining, simply present. Open. Available. The way you can be right now. Not trying to sleep. Simply present to the possibility of it. The night continued. The bear waited at the breathing hole. The seal that used this hole was somewhere below the ice, moving through the dark water, following whatever route its own biology and memory prescribed, approaching the breathing hole or not approaching it, on a schedule that had nothing to do with the bear above. The distance between the bear lying on the surface of the ice and the seal swimming beneath it was approximately 1.4 meters of frozen sea water. 1.4 meters. The same thickness as the ice everywhere. The bear could hear, through that 1.4 meters of ice, the sounds that filtered up from the water below. The creak of the ice itself, expanding and contracting in the cold. The very faint, low, distant sound of the ocean far beneath. And occasionally, very occasionally, something that might have been movement in the water just below the ice surface. The bear's ears are positioned on the top of her head, not particularly large compared to other bear species, but sensitive to the particular frequencies of sound that travel through ice and cold air. She listened. The night listened with her. If you are still following the bear at this hour, then something has happened to the way time is moving for you tonight. It has slowed. Not in the way that time slows when you are waiting for something you want. In the way that time slows when you have stopped measuring it against anything. The bear does not know what time it is. She knows when the light changes. She knows when the wind shifts. She knows the scent of what she is waiting for and the sound of what she is listening for. But the number, 1:27 in the morning, means nothing to her. Time, for the bear, is simply the sequence of what is happening. And what is happening right now is ice, cold, stillness, waiting, the occasional very faint sound from below the ice, the wind at 4 kilometers per hour from the northwest. That is all that is happening. That is everything that is happening. And your own moment right now is similarly simple. Warmth. Dark. Breathing. The voice in the dark. That is everything that is happening right now. And it is exactly enough. At 2:14 in the morning, the seal surfaced. The events that followed lasted approximately 0.8 seconds. At the end of those 0.8 seconds, the bear had caught the seal. This detail is included because it happened and because the bear's life requires it to happen and because honesty in describing an animal requires acknowledging what that animal does. The seal was a ringed seal. It weighed approximately 68 kilograms. The bear ate. This took approximately 40 minutes. The eating is not described in detail, not because it is disturbing exactly, but because the bear eating is simply the bear being a bear, filling the biological requirement that everything alive must fill, and describing it in detail adds nothing to the quality of the rest that this story is intended to provide. The bear ate. Following eating, the bear moved approximately 30 meters from the site and lay down on the ice. Her stomach was full. The metabolic engine that had been running on 10-day-old reserves was now resupplied. The bear lay on the ice and was still. The bear lay on the ice and was still. She had walked approximately 14 kilometers since leaving the Pressure Ridge Hollow at 12:40. She had caught one seal. She had eaten approximately 68 kilograms of seal. She was now lying on the ice at approximately 2:55 in the morning, with the sun still on its low circuit of the horizon, the wind at approximately 3 kilometers per hour from the northwest, the temperature at approximately -19 degrees Celsius. She was, by any available measure, content. Not in the way the word content usually means, which implies a conscious assessment of circumstances and a positive result. Simply content in the way that a living thing is content when its immediate needs have been met and the environment around it is within the range of what it is built for. She was full. She was on the ice. The ice was solid. The wind was manageable. There was nothing else required. Her eyes were closing. Let your own eyes close a little more now if they are not already closed. The bear is full and still on the ice. You are warm and still wherever you are. Both of you have what you need. Both of you are exactly where you are supposed to be. The ice holds the bear. The night holds everything.